What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic channel. Today, we're talking some college football DFS ahead of Wednesday, week 9. We've got a 2-game slate. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're brought to you by Prize Picks. They have a first match deposit bonus up to $100 for new users, and they're giving you 1 free month of OddsShopper. With OddsShopper, we have tools to help you in all of your sports betting experiences, sides, totals, player props, which is particularly important for Prize Picks because they have player prop offerings in college football, of course, but also NFL, NBA, NHL, MLBs in the postseason, as well as a ton of niche sports. Make sure you check them out with the link in the video description below to get that first match deposit bonus. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to play. Okay, diving into this 2-game slate, we've got a greasy one on deck, as has been the case with Wednesdays for a while now. We kick things off with Jacksonville State taking on FIU, 7.5-point spread in favor of the road team, Jacksonville State. 46.5 total here, which is the better total on the slate overall. Both teams play with some pace. Jacksonville State is first. Florida International is 42nd. Jacksonville State pretty run heavy, though. They only have a 40% pass rate, whereas Florida International comes in about neutral. They have a 49% pass rate. Starting with the Jacksonville State side, it's a really bad quarterback slate. I think Zion Webb is the safest, and he's not even the safest quarterback. They've split time between him and Logan Smothers throughout the year. Smothers did play a bit in their last game. Very, very small amount. He was dealing with the ankle injury. But I think we've seen Zion Webb play well enough to retain this starting job. He's an excellent rusher, certainly has an edge there, over 100 yards in the last game. And then he does just enough passing. When you look at the drop-off from Smothers to Webb, efficiency-wise, it's not drastic. So, I mean, you're still running the risk of them potentially using Smothers in some spots, but I think Webb is still probably the safest signal caller we have, which is saying a lot because he's not very safe to begin with. I think you're live to even run non-quarterback super flex teams because of the risk with all these signal callers. From there, it's also going to be an injury news slate. Malik Jackson's questionable. He's kind of been the unquestioned feature back after they lost Ron Wiggins earlier this year. However, he got hurt in their second most recent game, missed their most recent contest, which allowed last year's lead rusher, Anwar Lewis, to come back and really handle a feature back workload that we saw from 2022. 17 carries last game. Involved in the pass game as well, only amounted to 6 targets over the last 2 games, but 5 of those came in the most recent contest. If Malik Jackson's out, Anwar Lewis is the best play on the slate. If Malik Jackson's in, I don't know what the split looks like. I would say probably something 60-40 in favor of Jackson, but very little confidence in that. You could even see 60-40 in favor of Lewis. I mean, he was the lead rusher last year, but we know Jacksonville State likes their timeshares. They've just been forced into feature back roles because of injury routinely throughout the year. At receiver, I think the biggest story was PJ Wells coming back from injury. Finally, the guy's barely played this year, but he had a route share north of 70% and he saw 10 targets. So this guy could just straight up either wide receiver 1. I don't know. They run a nasty rotation. Nobody on the year has a route rate north of 66%. That would be Quinton Lane. Perry Carter's close at 65%, but then you've got tight end Sean Brown at 59%. From there, it gets pretty gross. Sterling Galbon, Michael Petway, Jamari Joyner. These guys are all somewhat involved. And as you can see, when you have 6 guys rotating in and out, it's very hard for any one of them to stand out. I think if you're playing any of these guys, it's all the way down for Wells, or maybe you have a contrarian Perry Carter. He has averaged 6.3 targets per game over the last 4. On FIU, they'll pass a lot. I like their signal caller, Keon Jenkins, freshman. Pretty good mobility, but the problem is this offensive line is putrid, so he takes a lot of sacks. 29 sacks on the year. Only averages 237 as a passer per game on 29 attempts. The matchup's not great. Jacksonville State plays decent defense, so he's risky. He could finish with negative rushing yards, or because of his mobility, maybe he ends up with, a rushing score or something like that. Jenkins is fine for tournaments, but definitely safety, not guaranteed. In the backfield, Shamari Lawrence and Keon Owens, they handle a near 50-50 committee. It's moved in favor of Lawrence a little bit recently, closer to a 60-40. He outcarried Owen 16-11 last game. He also has a slightly better route share. So if you look at the targets and see Owens with 2, Lawrence with 1 last game, I wouldn't read too much into that. They still had similar routes with Lawrence at the top. So I do think the pricing is efficient. I would prefer Lawrence if just picking one, but I'll have exposure to both. Receiving game, Chris Mitchell's their number 1 receiver. Not really too much to say here about that. 9.5 targets per game over the last 4, 89 yards per game on a huge route share. There's not really a lot of pay-up options, especially at quarterback, so I do think prioritizing the good receivers makes sense. He's one of them. From there, the routes with this team have not been consistent, and one thing they did was give Rivers a few more routes, which surprised me, but that came at the expense of Bracey and Patterson. Last game, Eric Rivers, 81% route share. Dean Patterson, 60%. Jalen Bracey, 49%. Only other thing to mention here, Josiah Meeman played ahead of Jackson McDonald and Rocky Beers. He had a season-high 68% route share, which was way higher than anything else he'd seen. Previous high was 41%. So you got to ask yourself, do you think Meeman continues in that role, or does he drop back? Does it matter? He only had 1 target on the 68% route share to begin with. I would much rather play like Rivers, but if you need a guy really, really cheap, I would at least say his name. I certainly prefer like PJ Wells on the other side too. All right, before we move on, I want to tell you a little bit about our data package, our college football DFS package over at Stochastic. We have projections, ownership projections. We have these data tools that you're looking at right now, so you don't have to just pause the video, squint to see what's going on. You can actually look at it yourself, evaluate the opportunity for each of these players, price adjusted, make your decisions that way. I find it very easy and nice to contextualize the slate with these tools. But yeah, I build all these myself and put them up for you. So if you want to support as well, that's the best way to do so. Link is in the video description below. If you have questions on that, hit me up on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. DMs are open, happy to answer them. Second game on this Wednesday slate is UTEP, Sam Houston State, 36.5 total. So the inferior game overall. Sam Houston is the favorite despite being winless on the year. UTEP plays slow. They're 95th in pace. They have a 46% pass rate. Sam Houston plays a little faster at 76th. Their pass rate is 56.5%. UTEP, we've had no quarterback certainty all season. Gavin Hardison goes down. In their second most recent game, he tested it pregame, couldn't go. Apparently wasn't close because he didn't play last week either. Cade McConnell's been stepping in, non-mobile, below average efficiency passing. And I don't know if he starts. Jake McNamara, their original backup's been injured too. So we have no quarterback clarity. Whoever starts, I think, is viable for tournaments, but they also noted maybe they get Kevin Hurley, their 4th-string, involved. He's a little more mobile. This is by far the worst quarterback situation to target on the slate. You just don't have any certainty. And I think the best case scenario would just be getting Hardison playing. If he's out, I'm probably just going to X this because we don't know how much these guys play. I don't know. It's tough. I don't even know who starts. Anyway, I do think UTEP wants to be a run-heavy team anyway. They've embraced this since Hardison went down. Their offensive line is their strength on offense. Dan Hankins, since he returned from injury, he's been in a timeshare, almost 50-50 with Burgess. But that swung his direction in their most recent game, 16 carries to Burgess's 8. He's been more efficient, so this does make some sense. He's also the bigger back. And I think we do see this persist, but ultimately it's going to be a committee to some degree. 60-40, 70-30, it's going to be in that range with Hankins at the top. So DraftKings, he's cheaper. Doesn't make much sense to me, but I'll gladly play him at the cheaper price. FanDuel, I think they're efficiently priced. You could play either one of them over there. In the receiving game, Kelly Akari saw his route share drop a little bit last game, but don't be fooled. He threw a punch and got ejected. So 7 targets, reduced route share, not reading too much into it. He should be a full-time player, as is Jeremiah Ballard. From there, complete mess. Tyron Smith's been out. I think he's going to redshirt. Marcus Bellin's been out. That's a problem. Justine Clark's been out. They've had to move all the way down to players like Amari White as their 3rd wide receiver. So first of all, you should monitor injuries with UTEP. I think all those guys are going to continue to miss, but it's not guaranteed. So you do need to have your finger on the pulse of this UTEP team a little bit here. But otherwise, just to break it down for you clearly, the routes. Amari White was still only at 44%. He split time almost 50-50 with Kyle McNamara, 44%. Kelly Akari, Jeremiah Ballard are your full-time guys. And tight end, a bit of a rotation. Zach Fryer, 58%. Part of this is because they use a fullback. Julian Lopez plays a ton, so you don't always have your standard personnel you see with like normal teams. The fullback usage is pretty wild for UTEP. All right, last team, Sam Houston. You could make the argument that Keegan Shoemaker is the safest quarterback on this slate. I would be willing to hear it. It's either him or Zion Webb, but Zion Webb has Smothers. Shoemaker doesn't have a capable backup. Grant Gunnell, he stinks. Shoemaker is somewhat mobile, 133 yards on the ground this year. He's not efficient as a passer, just 220 yards per game, but he doesn't throw a lot. 37 attempts per game is good volume. UTEP's defense doesn't scare you, especially on the ground. So Shoemaker, he might honestly be the safest. It's between him and Webb. In the backfield, they're still down like 4 of their top 6 backs, but John Gentry's back. People incorrectly I don't know how this happened, but their beat reporter speculated that Gentry would be limited after he heard the coach's press conference. That's not what he said. The coach said that Gentry was limited in practice, not that he would be limited in the game. And those of you that watch the NFL and stuff, you know that sometimes limited practice participation is just in preparation to handle a full workload of the game. So be wary of the Sam Houston beat reporter. He speculates on things he shouldn't. Gentry did have a full workload, like absurd full workload too. 11 carries. And what really surprised me was the pass game work. 8 targets, over 60% of the routes. Like, it was full-blown John Gentry bell cow season. And I don't know why that would change. He's another week removed. He's practicing. Everything's fine. You still don't have any of the other backs returning. So it's him and it's Adrian Murdaugh as the change of pace. In the receiving game, they've lost their top 2 receivers this year, but Noah Smith has filled in admirably. He hasn't seen fewer than 11 targets in 4 straight games. That's 12.8 targets per game in that 4-game span. You're playing Noah Smith. They've also narrowed opportunity to Malik Phillips and Alvonte Woodard. Both of them had 6 targets in the last game. They're completely fine. Elijah Sohn, if you watched last week's game, now you know he's a swimmer, and if you didn't know, you heard it 18 times. He had 4 targets, caught the touchdown. I would much rather find my way up to Woodard or Phillips, but Sohn, he does play a decent amount and could maybe be used as a cheap option here. But that'll do it for the slate. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If I missed anything, reach out on Twitter if you'd like. I'm at Matt_Gajewski. Otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow breaking down more college football DFS. Until then, good luck.